So UFC 323 just concluded, and honestly speaking, this card really lived up to the hype of being the final numbered event of the year. Lots of interesting things happened. We found out a lot of things, even including some fight announcements coming up. So we have a lot of things to look forward to in that arena. But we had a lot of controversy, so to speak, in the main event specifically. I'll get to those events as I approach them, but let me begin my recap, review, and breakdown, starting from the early prelim opener of Mohamed Naimov versus Maron Santos. This fight is more or less went in line with what I had said in the beginning. Maron Santos was just too good of a striker. Like, you really saw that come out. Santos now training with the Fighting Nerds over there in Brazil. He has a good plethora of talented opponents to spar with and train with, and we saw a lot of those skill sets come into play in his matchup against Mohamed Naimov. This fight began initially a little bit slower, but you still saw the differences in skill set. Santos was trying to press the offensive with his striking, but Naimov was kind of trying to slow that down and stifle it, and was still making it very much a back and forth fight. However, as you saw the fight progress, you started seeing Santos kind of try to get his advantages more and more, kind of shake off a lot of those grappling and or clinch attempts. Like, even with things like head clashes and stuff, Santos was still very present. But when that third round came along and he got the opening, Santos took it and he put Naimov out. Overall, despite being a slow performance in the beginning, it definitely was a fantastic finish. And it definitely demonstrated that Santos is dangerous at any point in the fight. And we have a lot to look forward to from this upcoming prospect. Moving on to the next fight, we have Mansour Abdul Malik versus Antonio Tricoli. This fight was exactly what I called it. Like, if you don't believe me, go and check my last prediction video. I said this was not going to be a long fight. Tricoli is not good. Mansour Abdul Malik is a very anticipated upcoming prospect in the middleweight division right now. He made short work of him, got in and got out. Tricoli just, at his level, I'm personally even questioning why he's in the UFC, or at the very least, at this point in time. Tricoli just is not at the level of what you would come to expect from a UFC caliber fighter. I feel like every time I've seen him recently, he's been just getting dominated in one aspect or another. Still, you never know what might happen at any point in someone's career, especially when we get into the main event, but this was basically just a walkthrough for Mansour Abdul Malik. Moving on to the next fight. Now, this one, we have Iwo Baranewski. We have Iwo Baranewski. Boy, I apologize for that name mashup. But we had Baranewski versus Ibo Aslan. In this fight, I actually had Ibo Aslan, but ironically, Iwo won the exact same way I expected Ibo to win. This was just a shootout from the very beginning. There wasn't too much skill involved in this. Ibo initially attempted to push the offensive himself. He tried to land a lot of that big power shots, that quote-unquote Turkish power that he tries to rely on. He landed a lot of shots on Iwo, but Iwo was completely and totally game from the beginning, and they literally just started shooting out. It looked like an old Pride FC fight, to be honest. They just kept diving at each other. They kept trying to shoot, kept trying to knock each other out, but the thing that was noticeable was Iwo was landing a little bit cleaner than Ibo was. While they were both just kind of chucking big swinging shots, Iwo was not only shooting, landing a bit better placement wise and having a greater effect on Ibo Aslan, he was also taking Ibo Aslan's punches a lot better as well. He didn't buckle. He's kind of staved back a little bit here and there, but he was fully engaged Whereas Ibo Aslan, he got dropped, went to a knee at different points. That he was showing big physical reactions. He basically tried to play the game he usually does whenever he's able to steamroll somebody, and it just so happened that his opponent, which I thought that Ibo would have had the greater power advantage in this matchup, but it turns out that Baranowski was the one who had a little bit more power. I'd even say that it was more so the placement than the power itself, but Baranowski was not only landing the better shots, he was taking the shots a lot better as well. He just ended up being the one who got him out of there first. Makes me curious to see how he does against a smarter fighter. For both of them, but for Baranowski, I'd like to see how he does about somebody who's a little bit more cerebral in their approach, especially with light heavyweight, with the pure exception of Jiří Procházka. That division is filled with people who, at the higher echelon of the tier list, are a lot more cerebral and strategic in how they implement their game plan. Jiří kind of just overwhelms you at some point, and even he is a lot more conscious recently. But as for Ibo Aslan, we need to see improvement. This is the issue with Ibo right now. Ibo is looking a bit amateurish in how he attempts to move on in this division. He tends to be very much the I'm going to try to steamroll you type of guy. I thought it would have worked against Iwo Baranowski, and it turns out that he went against somebody who was just better at the game that he likes to play. But in general, as you go against better competition, you can't be in a situation where all you have is your power. You can't have no technique, no timing, no adjustments, no reading. You can't just think I'm going to knock out everybody. Because as the quality of your opponents increases, then the variety of skills and applications of said skills that you need will also increase. I think Ibo Aslan is severely lacking in how he can emphasize and implement his game. I think he's severely lacking in variety. And if he doesn't fix it, then he's going to just become another could have been within the UFC. Moving on, we have Edson Barboza versus Jalen Turner. This is another fight that I picked the loser, or at least the person who ended up losing, to win. I had Edson Barboza in this. On paper, I'll admit this, on paper, Jalen Turner should kill Edson Barboza. But personally, it is very difficult for me to have faith in a fighter that seems to struggle so often with mental difficulty as far as will is concerned. To be specific, I have issues having faith in fighters that seem to give up on themselves a lot. Jalen Turner has always appeared mentally weak to me. He's got the skill set and the talent of a fucking killer, but he rarely shows that. And even when he does, it feels like he'll also occasionally throw that shit away when he's on a roll. Like, it makes it very hard to root for him at times. Somebody who also has similar issues is Brendan Allen. All the skills and talent to be considered a world beater in the right circumstances, but they seem to be the ones who are restricting their own potential. So in this fight, it was great to see Jalen Turner's return. It was great to see him honestly slaughter a fighter that he should have. The combinations, the timing, the distance management, he looked phenomenal. But even he himself admitted in that post-fight press conference that he's been struggling with a lot of self-doubt. And it's difficult for me to believe in a fighter that doesn't believe in himself. But let's hope that perhaps he can continue to develop more in that area, and we can expect much greater shows and improvement to come from Jalen Turner's second stint. Moving on, we have the final fight of the early prelims, which is Marvin Vettori versus Bruno Ferreira. I'll pick Bruno Ferreira for this one, but Personally, I'm not gonna lie, I was not very impressed by this fight. If anything, the person I was most impressed in this fight with was Vettori. I understand that Vettori was apparently the favorite for this fight. But if you watch Vettori's last fight against Brendan Allen, it's very difficult for me to watch that and then say, oh, he should beat a Bruno Ferreira. Vettori looked slower than he has in the past against Brendan Allen. He looked a bit timid when it came to exchange clashes. He didn't look as aggressive. He didn't look as physically strong. All of which are elements that he has a severe disadvantage against somebody like Bruno Ferreira. A killer knockout artist with incredible forward momentum and pressure who is very physically strong as well. No, I expected Ferreira to steamroll him, but that's not what I saw. I saw Vettori being able to be defensively sound in the early parts of that fight. I saw him kind of cause Ferreira to slow down. And yes, Ferreira missed weight, which is always a disappointment when a fighter doesn't maintain their professionalism as far as the weigh-ins are concerned. But you saw Ferreira come in there, especially with missing weight. You would expect a more physical domination, at least in that first round where they're both dry. But it felt as if Vettori was the one who pressed forward a lot in those aspects. And a lot of those clashes, Vettori was putting together more combinations and stuff like that. So it definitely was an interesting thing to see. Overall, though, I think the right decision was reached, and I'm not just saying it because it was my pick. I think that for at least 2 of those 3 rounds, Ferreira was the one who landed the cleaner blows. He was the one who took the least damage, and he was the one that kind of had the more forward momentum, or at least the more effective striking in those exchanges. And even mixed in a little bit of grappling here and there on both parts. Overall, pretty decent fight. I like the showing from Marvin Vettori. See that he still got the heart, still willing to be in there and engage, despite it seemed like him having that a step to half step back from when he was in his prime, and against a young, dangerous up and comer like Bruno Ferreira. But once again, a bit impressed with Vettori, a bit disappointed with Ferreira. We'll see how they both respectively perform in their next outings. Moving on, got the regular prelims. We have Nazim Sadikov versus Varesiam. This one also got, with the prelims, I was back and forth. With Sadikov, he kind of got steamrolled by Varesiam, but he was very strategic in how Siam did it. For me, I thought Sadikov's striking would have made a difference, and I thought that his grappling defense would have been good enough to kind of, at the very least, slow down Ferziam enough so that he could implement his game plan, but that's not what happened. Ferziam, from the very start to the very end, he was ensuring that he took full advantage of his length. He made sure that he had, in the striking exchanges, maintained his distance, was attacking from the outside, landed punches, strikes, knees, elbows. He landed whatever he could, wherever he could. He implemented a lot of grappling in the beginning, kept putting Sadikov in compromising situations, got his back when he could, kept going for submission attempts, or at least the setups for the submission attempts, to keep Sadikov unable to rest and regain his breath in any position, and he kept going forward. And once that came to that second round, the end of it, a moment when Sadikov got too comfortable and thought, oh, well, I'm about to have one more chance in the final round to come back, landed that big elbow and almost fully took him out. In my personal opinion, I don't think that should have been a stoppage right then and there, because the second round bell had already ended. The round was over after the elbow landed, yes, but it was before the ref waved the fight off and Sadikov was still present. And yet he was very, very, very dazed. He was wobbled. He was confused. But we've all seen those fights before where a fighter got messed up incredibly and then was still able to stand up, walk to their corner, and win the fight. In my opinion, that round should have been a 10-8, not a finish. I think that Feresiam should have gotten a 10-8 for that. Then, if Sadikov was able to make it to his corner, we continue from the second round, and then we see what happens from the third round. My apologies, and then we can see what happens then. Either way, it's understandable for why it was stopped, even though I don't agree with it. We'll see how Feresiam continues to develop, but he did look fantastic. He looked very strategic. He looked very, very, very improved in comparison to his last showing. A constantly improving fighter is exactly what I want to see from a prospect. As for Nazim Sadikov, he got a lot to work on. He really has to work on what to do with those taller fighters, especially in a class like the lightweight division. There's a lot of different body types, so he really has to be more prepared with breaching those gaps, overcoming the distance, and specifically getting out of those grappling exchanges. Moving on, we have Macy Barber versus Karine Silva. This fight, I had Karine Silva, but I think it's very clear that Macy Barber won. Even though I was the pick for Karine Silva was my pick, it definitely was a bit disappointing in what she attempted certain aspects. She tried to press the grappling. She tried to get her submissions initially, but she kept being susceptible to Macy Barber's ground and pound. Whenever she got in those exchanges, she was a lot more timid whenever she realized the potential finishing threat that Barber presented, and then that made it disappointing in the aspect that you saw her game plan adjust. In real time, you saw her get scared, get overly concerned, get worried, and kind of slow down massively in the momentum she was pushing, especially when Barber kept kind of getting to those dangerous positions. It made Silva you saw how her plan went from trying to win the fight to trying not to get finished. And that's not what you want to see. Especially when you're behind, you want to see when you get to that point, especially in the third round, when you know that you're either behind or it's really, really close. You want to make a consolidated effort to push hard. That's it. You want to make it a statement that you have to go out there and risk everything in order to win everything. And that's not what I saw from Karine Silva. I saw somebody who kind of regulated herself to just accepting the eventual result as if it was inevitable. And I'd like to see an adjustment the next time she comes out. Overall, decent scrap. Great to see Macy Barber back in top form. I thought the layout of her, her being out would have had a bigger impact on her, and then especially with the momentum Karine Silva is building, and then she does have a diverse skill set herself. I wasn't expecting Macy Barber to kind of more or less force her way through that. She looked very strong in these exchanges. There was a couple moments where she kind of just out-muscled Karine Silva and dominated the position. It was great to see from somebody like Barber, who was on a run and on a roll before she had personal issues that took her away from the cage for a bit. But this is a great way to re-enter yourself into the conversation, especially with some of the changes that's taking place in the flyweight right now. Moving on to the next fight, we have Terrence McKinney versus Chris Duncan. This is one of those fights that also kind of more or less went how I said it would. Terrence McKinney is a very streaky fighter, but the reason why he's so streaky is because of his style. Terrence McKinney is that guy who dives right in. Like how I was just saying that Silva sometimes has to risk everything to win everything. McKinney risked everything just because he felt like it. You see him dive right at Chris Duncan, had a lot of big moments, had the potential to be the one to finish him. However, McKinney gets overzealous. He doesn't take the time to pace himself and refocus and then pick his shots. He just keeps charging, and he either gets you or you get him. And in this aspect, he got. Chris Duncan, on the other hand, a lot more patient fighter. My opinion, a lot more well-rounded fighter. And I'd argue that just the quality of individual experience, timing, understanding, and intentionality that is within Chris Duncan was just a bad match for somebody who goes with that berserker style of Terrence McKinney. Dangerous knockout power if he's able to connect enough, but he leaves himself way too open in doing so. And I just saw him just getting outpaced by Chris Duncan. Moving on with the final fight of the prelims. This one made me upset. And it made me upset because of Grant Dawson. Grant Dawson was my pick for this fight. I am so tired of wrestlers and or grapplers not understanding what they are. When you are fighting against somebody who is using a style different from your own, and your style is a dominant part of how you win. What do I mean by that? When you look at Charles Oliveira, he is a grappler first. His submission game is a big reason, a big part of his winning. That's his style. However, he can strike. He can knock you out. He can get to those positions and he'll still be a competent threat. That is not the case for Grant Dawson. Another example is Ilia Topuria, who, despite coming from a grappling background, he is a striker. He can fully engage with you in striking. That is his style. That is his preference. However, he does not shy away from grappling exchanges and is still capable of imposing his will, and that doesn't necessarily slow his game down. With a Grant Dawson, you see him going against Manuel Torres and having this extended period of striking and very clearly losing these exchanges. He's the slower fighter. He has less combinations. He's struggling to breach the distance. He's not really putting together anything that is appropriately winning him the fight. And yet still, he is not trying and properly attempting the takedowns. If you shoot once and somebody stuffs it and that is your style, shoot again. Get to the clinch. Force them against the cage. Do something. Hit a trip. Hit a throw. Attempt it. You are already losing because you are getting picked apart in the striking, which is not your game specialty, or you don't possess a high level skill set in it. The last time Grant Dawson lost properly, he got walked down and knocked out. That experience should let you know that you're not invulnerable, and it should let you know that striking is not your absolute domination. And while I'm positive he's done significant improvements and he looked improved in his striking, it's not good enough to go against somebody who is just significantly better than you in that department, because that is their specialty and that is their fight style. Change the game. Don't play a losing game. If you can't play chess, then flip the board and start playing checkers. Don't play chess when you don't even understand the rules properly. And then once you get crowned on the other team against you, you now look at them and say, shit, maybe I should have tried something else. You've already lost. Now Grant Dawson has to fight harder to get back to where he was at, which was on the brink of a ranked opportunity at a higher level. He was an opponent that was, if he won this, he could have potentially gone for a top 10 fight next. But now he's for way back in the line. And people are just getting back on the bandwagon. Don't take these unnecessary risks. Same thing with Bilal Muhammad. Even certain parts of this fight in the main event initially with Merab. Remember who you are and what you are. And do that and do it well. That's one of the reasons why Khabib was so dominant. Because you don't stick to a striking battle if you're not a striker. We just saw what happened with Sean Brady. Remember what and who you are. Be competent enough that you can utilize other skill sets, whether it be individually or in order to set up your main specialty. But don't forget what your specialty is. Unless you're that good that you can rely on everything, like an Oliveira or a Topuria. It's always so frustrating to see when grapplers do that. Moving on, we have the main event. And I'll tell you, these main events was, for me personally, a bit of a roller coaster. But let's start off with the main event opener of Jan Blachowicz versus Bogdan Guskov. This fight ended in a draw. Personally speaking, I disagree with the draw, but I understand it. To kind of give the quick breakdown, the first and third rounds went to Jan. However, 2 judges gave the second round to Bogdan as a 10-8. In my opinion, that second round should not have been a 10-8 because while Jan was heavily compromised, he was still fully conscious to the point that he was able to stave off Bogdan's onslaught, his intentional finishing onslaught, for over 3 minutes. While, yes, it was dominant, it wasn't to the point that he couldn't move, wasn't to the point that the fight was at risk of being finished. And I don't think that it was that overwhelmingly dominant that you could say that it's clear he stood no chance. Because if that was the case, then Jan would have gotten finished. That's my perspective. However, I completely understanding how somebody else would look at it and said, he's bleeding crazy in the second round. He can't get up. He's constantly getting striked against. Yeah, it's a 10-8. That's just a difference in perspective for that one. With the first round, Jan did what he usually does. He kept walking forward. He used the jab to try to set stuff up. He constantly was pressuring, and Bogdan had superior movement. Bogdan was in and out all around. Bogdan was the one who was really putting a lot of dancing, fluttery movements. Jan has always struggled against opponents with excellent movement. We just saw it with Carlo. Oh, my apologies. I don't know what I was thinking. Oh yeah, we just saw it with Carlos Ulberg. We just saw it against Alex Pereira when he first moved up to light heavyweight. However, with Jan, he usually tries to slow you down, uses the leg kicks to soften you up. Like, compromise your movement, stick you with the jab, build on that power, and then finish you when he gets a chance. In this fight, I feel as if Jan should have used the leg kicks a lot more consistently earlier. Because in the third round, you really saw that be an issue. In the aspect of Bogdan is tired, Jan is still moving forward, but despite all of that, Bogdan is still got the motion and the wherewithal to be constantly changing posture, adjusting, circling around, still making it difficult for Jan to catch him once Jan started building momentum. That is the issue because Jan allowed him to maintain his legs throughout. Jan has heavy, dangerous leg kicks, and every time he used them, they had an impact. But he just didn't use them that much. In my opinion, it seems like he's starting to show signs of aging and fatigue in certain aspects. He's a bit slower. He's a lot less aggressive than he once was. Maybe it was a strategy, or maybe it just is something that's slowly shifting for him at this point in his fighting career. However, when I then compare that last 30 seconds where he finally just leaped at Bogdan and like hit him with that flurry and dominantly put a bow on the round, if he had done that earlier, or if he had compromised Bogdan's movement enough with the leg kicks, he could have done that much earlier and had a lot more effect. With this fight ending in a draw, I'm not quite sure what's next for Jan. To be honest, he's kind of at a crossroads right now. My opinion, he should contemplate retirement at this point, or perhaps he should do a lot of self-reflection to determine what exactly his personal goals are at this point in his career. As for Bogdan, I think Bogdan more or less had a good showing, but he just got caught by somebody who's pretty powerful at certain points in time, and that counter and that jab of Jan was making him very wary throughout the fight, so he wasn't able to really press his own offensive as much as he wanted to. Look forward to seeing how he matches up against other members of the light heavyweight division. Moving on to the next fight, we have Henry Cejudo versus Peyton Talbot. This fight surprised me for a number of reasons. First of all, I thought Henry Cejudo was going to kill Talbot. I thought it was too soon to give Talbot this level of skill set from an opponent. Henry Cejudo is very good everywhere. Fast hands, good wrestling, good power, good fight IQ and understanding, excellent timing. However, in this matchup, the one thing that I would say Cejudo lacks is height. And you saw that play a huge role in this fight. Peyton Talbot had an excellent plan when it came to maintaining distance and implementing his striking. Every time Cejudo attempted to be aggressive, Peyton Talbot kind of humbled him by hitting him with counters and timing his strikes and hitting him with shot attempts later in the fight. And then Henry Cejudo kept kind of having to do 2 attacks for the price of 1. He'd have to strike once, miss, and strike again to try to bridge those gaps. And you saw Peyton Talbot was loving it from start to finish. He could reach Cejudo when Cejudo couldn't reach him. His striking was looking sharp. And then as the fight progressed and as he got more and more into the flow, he started hitting him with his own shots. And when you look at it right here, despite being an Olympic gold medalist, as he tells us all the time in wrestling, Peyton Talbot is the one who has more successful takedowns than Henry Cejudo in this matchup. You saw a lot of improvements from Peyton Talbot. A lot of big changes. Very, very, very impressive. You can see how much hard work was put into those improvements, and it was excellent to see. Peyton Talbot definitely, in my opinion, has regained favor with me of a prospect. We need and love to see these type of things. Losing a fight is not the end of the world. Losing a fight and then losing another fight due to the exact same flaws that were blatantly exposed in your previous fight with no sign of improvement whatsoever, those are the things that kill prospects. We need to see constant improvement, or at least the attempt to improve, from a lot of these people we tote as potential future champions and so on and so forth. So when you shoot guys like Peyton Talbot and you throw them against an opponent that, in my personal opinion, should have slaughtered them, and you see the improvements and you see the gaps being filled and you see how fantastic they look, that's when you get these moments where you're like, yes, now I can put a little bit more faith in them. Now I can push the narrative of what they could be. Now I can believe into who they are a little bit more. Now I can quote unquote drink the proverbial Kool-Aid a bit more. Overall, fantastic fight. Incredible improvements on the part of Peyton Talbot. Congratulations to Henry Cejudo on his retirement. I think we can all agree that we don't see him coming back after this one, as he did before. I know a lot of us believe he shouldn't have left in the first place. Henry Cejudo, certified legend. Despite everything, despite the jokes, the corniness that he can be, cringe, Henry Cejudo is without a doubt one of the legends of the sport. One of the few simultaneous double champions in MMA history, an Olympic wrestling gold medalist, one of the greatest sports combat athletes the world has ever known. Hope he has a lot of rest. Hope he heals up. I hope that he can spend that time relaxing and enjoying with his family. Moving on to the next fight, we have Brandon Moreno versus Tatsuro Taira. Once again, another fight where things were a little bit iffy with how it ended. Brandon Moreno was going back and forth with Tatsuro Taira. Moreno clearly won the first round due to kind of being stuck in a triangle attempt for the entirety of the first round, or more so sticking Tatsuro Taira in a triangle attempt for the entirety of the first round. When we got to the second round and we had these striking exchanges, Taira caught Moreno, and Moreno was kind of on the ground just covering up. And the thing that all these fighters know, especially somebody as experienced as a Brandon Moreno, you can't just stop moving. I hate to see fighters do that. Yeah, Moreno got up, but you are on the ground taking unanswered blows and you're just covering up like this. You're just covering up like this the whole time on the ground. You barely doing low movements. Then you went flat at one point and were slow to build your base back up. You need to do something. The ref is there to end the fight if it looks like a fighter is no longer able to continue. You need to continue showing that you are both present of mind and present of danger. You have to show that you are still a viable aspect in this fight. You can't just be on the ground and getting picked apart and getting hit, and then you just say, oh, well, I was doing this on the ground. We see that you're not moving. We can't take you seriously from the perspective of the referee. You put them in a bad position where they had to make a call of whether to let it go or whether to let it continue. And us as the fans are going to be against them regardless of which decision they go with. But in this case, it's completely understandable. Because I was calling that fight is going to get stopped because you're not defending yourself. Brandon Moreno ends up losing to Tatsuro Taira, and Taira ends up becoming the new #1 contender based on that status. And with that being said, I'm going to go right into the co-main event of Alexandre Pantoja versus Joshua Van. With that, looking at how everything ended up turning out, this fight absolutely killed my mood. It ruined my mood and just made me upset for even parts of that first round of the main event. I am a huge fan of Alexandre Pantoja. I think undoubtedly the second greatest flyweight of all time at this point. I think he spent a lot of time building his career and was on a legendary run. But to see his career or his championship run end like that is incredibly disheartening. He was started off as he usually does, super aggressive, all gas, no brake. He was charging at Van. He caught him a few moments and then just landing the wrong way and that shock completely going up his arm, concentrating on his elbow and letting him buckle, it makes it difficult for your arm to remain intact with just a little bit of bad posture. Ended up just not being able to get up, and Joshua Van ended up winning that TKO victory over him. And it literally just, it still upsets me, to be honest. It's just upsetting to see such a dominant champion lose in like a bullshit way. It's reminiscent of Tom Aspinall's leg injury against Curtis Blades. So for those of you who are saying it should have been a no contest, no, while I would love for that to be the case, no, in this aspect, it's going to be a loss on Pantoja's record, because the reality is that action, that medical case was caused after an exchange between Pantoja and Van. So that would be like with Aspinall once again against Blades. An exchange happened against your opponent. Doesn't matter whether exchange is really the full reason that caused it or not. Their injury resulted immediately after an exchange in a completely legal matter. You are no longer able to fight. It's going to be a loss. It's very sad to see. I think I heard Dana White say to Pantoja as he was leaving that he got to just heal up, get better, and they'll get him in there first thing for the rematch against whoever the flyweight champion is at the time. I think that's going to be for the best. He's going to be out for some time. That definitely looked like a break. He's going to be out for some time. Very, very strong willpower that he didn't make a sound the entire time with that exchange. My opinion right now, I think you have to do Joshua Van versus Tatsuro Taira for the next match. That should be a very exciting and fun fight to see. In that exchange, I think I'm kind of leaning towards Taira for that, with just the variety of skills that he possesses, but I wouldn't be surprised whoever wins that fight. They're just my early perspectives and opinions on it, but it's definitely one of those ones that I'd look forward to. Best wishes, hopes, and prayers to Alexander Pantoja, though. We look forward to seeing his return. Well, let's move on to the final fight, the main event. We have Merab Dvalishvili versus Peter Yan. This fight was incredible. Peter Yan learned and did everything he needed to do in order to beat Merab. You could see how deeply he prepared for Merab. From pacing to stance to tempo to the takedowns to the striking to the counters. Peter Yan was ready for every aspect of Merab's game. You could tell he wasn't just watching their previous fight, but also Merab's fights against other opponents. Even the fact that Peter sticked to the long guard was because that was where he was most effective in their initial clash. And with the long guard, he's able to better respond to takedowns while landing bigger counters as well. It was a very, very effective strategy. Peter Yan was pacing himself very well, and despite when the fight got into incredibly high tempos, he was still fully present and didn't lose himself at any point. Then, not to mention the fact that even when Merab tried to push a pace, Yan handled it, settled, countered, pressured him, never got overzealous, never let him go. In my opinion, he dominated every round. Every time Merab had a moment, Peter Yan made sure that he took that moment back, even down to the point of taking down Merab a few times himself. You can see that for Yan, it was very, very, very essential to set a statement with this performance. And that is what he did. So much improvements, domination in a lot of areas that we expected Yan to be the one who got dominated in. It was just a statement-making performance from head to toe. It is vintage Jan in full effect. To be honest, I'd even go as far as saying that this is probably how a lot of people initially thought the first fight would have gone. And then the first fight went like how a lot of people thought this fight would have gone. For me, I'm actually very interested in what a trilogy between these two would look like, especially once Merab goes back to the drawing board and then analyzes some of his own flaws and the improvements that Jan made against him and does the same in return. I think this would be a phenomenal trilogy for the UFC's bantamweight division, especially at a time when we were all thinking that there's nothing left for the division besides Merab's domination. Especially with Merab now losing in the time that he's going to take to recover because he got really damaged by Jan. And then depending on how active Jan himself decides to be, I would love to see Jan versus Umar Nurmagomedov. And then Jan with his rematch against O'Malley, that would also be a potential interesting fight to see, depending on how O'Malley does on his own, like next fight against Yadong, and then I'd say one more after that. Overall, fantastic card. Excellent upsets here and there. Unexpected moments. Controversy in a couple few points, couple few fights, couple few points, couple few fights. But this was a great way to end the year with a numbered card. Definitely looking forward to the final event of the year. But right now, this was excellent. Y'all let me know what y'all think. Drop a like, comment, share, and subscribe. Look forward to seeing all of you beautiful people next time. Please staying with me, stay rocking with me, and watch us so we grow together. Till next time, peace.